Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the series by me, Linda Wright, Planning Pundit. And as the front screen suggests, we seem to be up to episode 6. And today I want to talk to you about privacy distances. Now, this has come up this week. I was asked in my day-to-day business as a planning consultant and giving advice on planning to various clients, I was asked to go and look at a garden. Now, this garden is in the green belt. Now, that is a whole different case. And I'm not going to talk to you today about garden development in the green belt, although certain circumstances it can be done, but we will talk about that another day. Today, what I want to talk to you about is a lot of people come to me and look at their gardens and think, well, loads of land. Look at this, we can put a block of flats on here. Always happen like that because of something called privacy distances. Now, and one of the things that has also triggered this is not just me going looking at this particular site, but also somebody, Steve, you know who you are. I will tag you on LinkedIn. Steve put onto a LinkedIn post about privacy distances. And I thought, do you know what? I've been going on about this for decades. So this also has doubly triggered me to talk to you about privacy distances. What are privacy distances? And there's also something that is a kind of an unwritten planning rule that is called the 45-degree angle rule. Now, I will address this on an entirely separate video because it probably deserves its own little video. But there are all sorts of little nuances in planning that are not necessarily written down, or they're not necessarily very, very clear when you go onto the council's website. I wanted to talk to you about garden development. And as I've said, if you're in any of the London boroughs or any of the more developed urban areas or very high density city areas, the development pattern in those areas is going to be that much more intense. It's going to be a more intensified pattern of development. So therefore, a lot of what I'm going to talk about with regard to privacy distances is going to possibly be a bit more lenient in those authorities because, and especially the London boroughs, because land is that much more at a premium. And what the councils are trying to do is trying to get more houses on existing garden areas. Arguably are classified as brownfield land. This went on a few years ago now. It's not technically brownfield land, but it's being, for the purposes of development, then you can develop gardens. Now, as I've said, loads of people go, whoa, loads of land, we can put half an estate on here or something. That's not how it happens. And this is why I wanted to talk to you about privacy distances. And that's, I guess, the more modern name for them now. So what you have, if you have a classic single house on a large garden and large plot of land, the first thing that you need to do is be aware of looking at the surroundings. You cannot look at development like this. You can't do a blinkered approach to development and pretend that nothing else around you matters. It does. You cannot look at development of garden land in isolation. So what you need to do is look at, if there's a road, can you get good access? If there's a house next door, are there any windows? How close is it to the boundary? How close will be the development be that you want to do on the garden land? What's the garden size going to be? And one of the major issues that a lot of people don't look at is that if you have the main dwelling, what I'm going to call the parent dwelling, on the site. If we argued that we have the parent dwelling on the site, you will have habitable room windows. Now, I have this conversation with lots of people. The only thing that is not a habitable room window is a bathroom, and bathrooms usually are obscure glazed. Arguably, if you have a landing window, that might also be classed, I would class that as non-habitable. Everything else, you know, I've had people say to me, oh, of course, bedroom window isn't habitable. Yes, it is. It's a habitable room. So everything, living room, kitchen, bedrooms, the only thing that are not are bathrooms and arguably a landing or a staircase window. So let's have a look at that from a privacy distance point of view. If you have rear windows on the back of the parent dwelling and you want to put a new dwelling or back to back, shall we say, back to back on the site, if you have a roadway down the back or something like that, everything depends on the circumstances of each site, and each site will be different. So if you have the parent dwelling, you will have to stay, and if you're going to put habitable rooms, bedroom, living room, kitchen, anything like that, if you have the back of the parent dwelling and the rear or front, depending on how you orientate this, again, it's all going to be different, you would have to keep 21 meters distant between the two. If you have habitable room looking over habitable room, that is in order to keep privacy distances. So this means that you're probably going to have to keep, you know, it's pure mathematics, isn't it? Come on, 10.5 meter rear garden for the parent dwelling, or more if you can, and a 10.5 meter garden for the new dwelling. Now that's splitting it right down the middle. So long as you have the privacy distances, those two distances, if you have a much bigger house for the parent dwelling, then you might want to give it more space for the garden. But there has to be this 21 meters. So that is how you start looking at how development might be achieved on this site. You look at the parent dwelling, you look at the size of the site. So if you only have from the rear boundary of the parent dwelling to the boundary of the garden, if you've only got 21 meters, you don't have enough space to put the house in that orientation. Now, if you decide that you will put a house at the bottom of the garden and you will have a gable end, that requires much less of a privacy distance, because obviously gable ends don't usually have habitable rooms, and this would have to be designed without a habitable room window. So, for example, at your parent dwelling, the back of your parent dwelling or front, depends on how it's arranged. So if you're going from habitable room window to gable end with no windows in it, you're probably looking, and again, there might be a bit of flexibility, it depends on the council, you're probably looking at around 12 meters. So that then gives you a much better possibility. You know, you've almost halved from 21 meters down to 12 meters. If you have a window in that gable end, if, for example, you have, I don't know, a landing window and it's not obscure glaze, and you have maybe a utility room or a kitchen room window at ground floor, then that distance, if there's a gable end with a window in it, that distance normally goes up, so it increases. So you're normally looking at 13.5 meters. So these are your privacy distances. So hopefully this gives you some idea of whether development is achievable on a garden site, on a piece of garden land. Now, unfortunately, there's no good news in this business, is there? If you have a difference in levels, so that your parent property is up here and you have a very steeply sloping site, which is exactly the situation that I did the site visit for on Friday. So if you have a parent dwelling up here and you have a steeply sloping site, those privacy distances need to extend, they need to increase, because the greater the level, higher one property is than, and it might be the other way around. You might be putting something at the top of a steeply sloping garden and the parent house at the bottom. But the higher and the greater the distance in levels, the greater the possibility of a loss of privacy. So if you have a sloping site, then it might go from 21 meters to 22 meters to 23 meters. It might go up incrementally depending on the difference in levels. And that is also something that does need to be borne in mind, because a lot of these development sites are on a sloping garden site. So that's what came up with me. As I said, I'll get into greenbelt development another time because that needs its own dedicated little YouTube video. If you have any burning questions, please give me a shout. If you've got any question about this particular video about development on garden sites, please let me know. There are all sorts of other nuanced little areas. You can't simply put the back of a house with windows against the back garden fence of a neighbour's garden, because obviously overlooking loss of privacy. You have to allow some kind of buffer and garden area. And garden areas, again, depending on what you've got, normally you're looking at 10 or 11 meters. Again, similarly, you can't put a gable end right on the boundary with your next door neighbour, because that can be a dominant and overshadowing impact. So it's not just about privacy distances. And if you're wanting to put a driveway in there to get a car on there, you're looking at a minimum depth of 5 meters. And actually, that would probably only just about, most modern cars now, it probably only just accommodate some of the larger ones. So you're looking at a car's distance of a minimum of 5 meters. So you've got privacy distances. And as I said, if you have any questions about this, then please drop me a line, give me a shout. Privacy distances, you've got dominant impact on neighbouring properties, which is why I said you can't deal with these things in isolation. And anyone who is doing your design and your drawings for them, they need to be aware of what is surrounding the property. But your main issue with garden development, if you are going to keep the parent dwelling, now I do appreciate that some people look at the parent dwelling, think, do you know what, it's not worth keeping. I will go in, take it down and put a pair of houses on there brand new. So then you can work out all of your privacy distances. It's kind of easier with new development to demolish and start again. But if you want to keep the parent dwelling and realise the value in the garden and develop that, please be aware, keep in your head 21 meters, keep in your head that distance, and then you're not going to sort of run away and think you've got a development plot when in reality you might not have. But 12 meters to a gable end with no window, 13.5. About, you know, some of these things, some councils will be flexible with. It's planning, you know, it depends. There's no consistency. It depends on what the local council, what their needs are, what the development pattern is, and what they think might be reasonable at any one stage. So, as I've said, if you've got any questions, please let me know. Please be kind. Don't troll me, please. So that's me, Linda Wright, Planning Pundit. This was episode 6. And it was all about privacy distances. Different people call them different things, but it's privacy distances. That is the phrase that I use. Thank you very much for listening. Please, if you do like this, please like, share, subscribe, tell everybody else about it. And if I can possibly help with some of these mad videos, then that's my work here done. All right, have a good week, and there will be another episode next week. Thank you very much for watching.